Hi, welcome to TheatreCast, presented by the EdReach Network, giving educators a voice, a big voice. You've reached episode number 69, being recorded January 11th, 2015. This is the show where theater teachers and professionals share their passions for theater trends, share practical advice and tips, and ask questions of some of theater's most innovative collaborators. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Cusumano. I'm a theater and film teacher from St. Louis, Missouri. And joining me from the Buckeye State is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Danielle Filas, OHIO. Everybody here, as you might have mentioned, is very excited about the game tomorrow. But I am a language arts teacher, a technology integration specialist, and a theater artist here in Central Ohio.
And want to welcome Danielle back. We missed her last week. She was in traffic, snow and
yeah.
mess, and
Yeah.
we've tried to do hangouts on air over the phone.
It would not
It's
have
a
been
little
good.
hard.
It would not have been good driving when I was driving it. It would have been like, this is what it looks like to flip over in a ditch. That's great.
Yeah. Though we did have Sean O'Neill join us from the parking lot in his car.
That might have been all right.
Connecting to the McDonald's Wi-Fi.
Right, that's right.
But he wasn't driving, so all was safe.
Yeah, it would have been really bad.
Well, we're glad you joined us in 2015. And I have just returned from the Missouri State Thespian Festival. 3 days of theater all the time.
And very excitable teenagers.
Yes, and very excitable teenagers. And so I'm hoping for a snow day tomorrow so I can catch up on my sleep. And that could be a possibility. It is raining at the moment and supposed to turn into freezing rain, a little bit of snow, so fun winter mess.
We've already
Possibly.
had two. We've already had 2 snow days in our first week back. We just went every other day. It was a nice easing in.
Well, I had 2 days and then we left, and it was before we left it was like -20 with wind chill.
Yeah, it was when I checked the temperature, it was warmer by 3 times. It was 300% warmer in Anchorage, Alaska than it was here in Columbus, Ohio. That's just plain wrong. It's not right at all.
So this week we wanted to kind of discuss acting thing that I think is practical definitely for auditions, and in general with acting, but when you're dealing with auditions a little bit, and you'll have that allotted part of time. I helped adjudicate individual events on the acting side, and one thing that I kind of really remembered about, or helped bring back those moments, because one, I see these kids and then I don't ever see them again. So, which is very similar to, either a cold read or audition situation, where you have that time, you might know them, you might not, but what you see is what you get, and that's what you have to figure things out from as a director, as a teacher, those type of things. So one thing that really stuck in my head, I think it's important to work on, is making those specific choices. And we're going to kind of discuss some ways to do that, but one thing that always helps is taking a moment and okay, who are you talking to in the monologue? That's point 1. And point 2, where are you placing them?
Yeah.
That's towards the audience.
And do you give your kids tips and like tricks for those two things? I know I
Hmm.
do. I'll say it's really great if you can go in the room beforehand and pick an exit sign. Ideally, you want your point of focus to be just over the heads of your adjudicators. You don't want to be looking them right in the eye and forcing
Hmm.
them to feel like they have to play back with you. But right over their head, not down, because we don't want to see the top of your head, not in profile. We want to see your whole face. So I usually tell them to pick a spot in the room. Exit signs are usually good because they're usually a little bit above, but not
Hmm.
crazy high in the air. They're stationary. Usually there's more than one because sometimes in your monologue you might be talking to more than one person.
Hmm. And if you're, if you can choose a monologue, and it kind of depends. I mean, like if you're picking Shakespeare, some of those speeches, if you're doing Henry V, St. Crispin's Day, well, you're going to be talking to a group of people, but still break that group of people into individual people.
Yeah.
So maybe, it's the guard you fought, or the guard or soldier you fought 12 battles with, and then the next guy you look at on the different line is, it's their first battle, and what are you going to say to them? And look at the script and see where it can help you with that, because help tying that in then allows you to make those moments specific. Then we, as the auditioner, the people, directors, whatever you want to call us, the people not acting with you in the room,
Yes. Your audience.
your audience, we can have a sense of what's going on. Um, the ones that always stood out. I think I watched 40 in that afternoon, which or yeah, at least 30, which is a lot in 4 hours. And just, and
Yes.
and that's timed, and um, or for us it was timed, so it's finding those moments, but you have to know who you're speaking to, because sometimes it just wasn't aware of who they were speaking to and what was going on. But if you can make those choices, and it would be helpful. So, when dealing with specifics, where should one go, Danielle? Where
Oh,
would you tell someone to go
I
to
think
find
as far
specifics?
as far as well, I don't know if you're talking about resources or if you're talking about in the script where to
In
go,
the,
but in the script, I mean, you've got to know who, like you said, you've got to know who you're talking to, and not just an abstract of who I'm talking to, not just I'm talking to my mom, but to think about even if it's not in the script, even if it's not specifically stated in the script, but to
hmm
make that mom really realistic. I always have my
hmm
kiddos start out by saying, well, if you could cast any actor in the world to play your mom in this scene, who would it be? Is it Meryl Streep? Is it Kathy Bates? Is it the lunch lady? And whoever that is, that's who you want to put there. And you want to make them real and figure out, almost spend more time thinking about how they're reacting than planning, oh, I'm going to look
hmm
sad now, or oh, I'm going to look angry now. But think about how that each of your words is an action. So you're trying to do something to the
hmm
recipient of what you're saying. So if even the word hello, are
hmm
you trying to stop them from leaving the room? Hello? Are you trying to seduce them? Hello? Are you trying to shame them? Hello? What are you trying to do with that word? And think about how it's impacting the person. So think of it as an action. Is it a slap? Is it a caress? What is it? And how is the person reacting? And for goodness sake, give them time to react.
Hmm. Yeah, if you
Um,
rush through it, I mean that's part of the specific that though finding those specific choices is how would that other person you're talking to react. And really, when you have those moments of silence and realization in the monologue, when you're on stage, I mean that's what pulls us in as audiences. What's going to happen next? Because we don't get to hear what they've said to you in your in the scene that you're playing. That what look did they give you? Well, we as an audience don't see that, but we see that through your eyes. And I mean, I love that part about acting is
Reacting.
yeah, the reacting,
Yeah.
and it's hard to do when you're up there alone.
But
And
it's
we get it.
completely magical when you do it.
Yes.
It's 100% more strong to have
Hmm.
a monologue that's not packed with words. So I know I can just hear students saying, but I only get 2 minutes and I've timed it out perfectly. I've got to say it fast. I cut your monologue. Your monologue's too
Hmm.
long. If it's
Yeah.
2 minutes and you've got to go through it at a rip pace, all you are is a talking head that's reciting words. That's not what they're looking for. And this isn't a recitation. This is
Hmm.
acting. So cut it in half, and cut it to the start at the point where it's exciting. Don't start way at the beginning where it's boring and it's all exposition. Start where it's exciting, and decide what you're doing to the person and exactly how they're reacting. Are they
Yeah. I
laughing
mean,
at you? Is she filing her nails while she's talking to you and you've got to make her look up at you? And pick something juicy for her to do. Your acting partner.
a good suggestion to work your way through that, and I enjoy doing this in with students is um, having them partner up. And so we're doing our monologue unit, and I'll be doing that next month or two in my class. Is who so you take turns being the acting partner. Um, and there's a couple of different things to do. One, be the acting partner and just listen and react to what they're saying. Figure out the specifics. Who are you talking to? Have the acting partner that you paired up with react to what you're saying. See how that makes you then react or change. When we had Jack Parkhurst on, he's the one, that I tell all my students is you can't act sad, but you can act, I want this person to do that.
Mhm.
And then you don't get that, well, then you're going to use a different tactic. And that tactic may be, pouting. It could be stomping your feet. It could be all those different things. It could be change in tone. It could
Could
be,
be trying to look sad to elicit
yes.
sympathy. That's the only time you're gonna act sad.
Hmm.
It's when your
Or,
character's doing it for a
real
reason.
cry or fake cry, depending on your character.
Hmm.
They could do fake tears or crocodile tears, or they could do, it depends on all those given circumstances. But if you take that time to figure that out, and you have that acting partner, and take some moments to journal those things of, because all of a sudden that'll make you think in a different way. And if you can then think and you have that specific person that you acted the scene with, you can then imagine they are there when you're doing your uh, audition, and then that makes it that much more real. Otherwise, it's just like you're not doing a math problem in your head, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
sometimes I think people, it's they rehearse it too much, or
Yeah, it's a robot. Hi,
yes,
my name is
I
Danielle, and I'm going to perform this for you. Oh, from Musifier that was celebrated from an invention came for stage for the stacked months. Behold the swelling scene. And then, yeah, that's not acting. That's
um
not acting.
and because we may ask you to change the specifics on whatever you're doing to head one of my students auditioned for a program while we were down there, and they did a little test on checking how they um, react to taking a direction, and the direction they gave them was totally opposite of what was in there.
I do that all the time.
But you want to see, one, can they do what you've given them? And, okay, so you've been given this odd given circumstance. Dive in and go with it and have fun. One of the moments that still sticks with me is at the Thespian Festival, I want to say, 10 years ago maybe, Jeannie Tesori, who wrote Thoroughly Modern Millie, or was maybe 2006 or 2007, there was this girl, I think she was a sophomore. It's still one of my favorite acting moments, and it was just in this one room, this one time where she had her sing I've Got the Sun in the Morning and the Moon at Night from Annie Get Your Gun, and to give her that, to make it more specific and to raise the stakes for that moment, she said, okay, your character has cancer. And, she really wants to connect to who she's singing to, or who she's singing to's got cancer. I can't remember which now, but, I mean, that specific, and how to play that physically. And, I saw the girl, for a couple summers after. She doesn't know that I'm like, this major acting moment, you have no idea. I still remember it to this day.
It's powerful. It's powerful. And it can be anything. It can be, if you're an acting teacher listening to this and you want to think about doing that, I used to love just whispering in my actor's ear before they walked up for a mock. I wouldn't do this in a real audition, but on mock audition, I would say, you really have to pee. And it has nothing to do with anything in the monologue at all, but it does two things. It gets them out of their head, and makes all of the rehearsed, rote, automatic acting that's been going on, because they're so rehearsed, it makes it go out the window, because now you're just focused on this one weird thing. And it also it keeps it alive, I guess. It makes it a living thing, as opposed to, I rehearse this moment. I can't stand it. I get that you should block your auditions. I get that. It's not a bad idea to block your auditions.
No, However, avoiding happy feet,
right. Especially if you did it with an understanding of, like you said, Nick, changing tactics. If I'm changing tactics, maybe I'm changing where I'm standing as well. I can see that. However, when it's just choreographed and just feels unconnected to the internal life of the character, then I have trouble with it. And if I say to an actor, I've done this too, you're not allowed to get out of the chair. You can move as much as you want in the chair. You're not allowed to get out of the chair. The ones who have just rehearsed with no sense of the internal terrain of their character are completely thrown. The ones who are alive and in the moment on stage, by changing that one specific, it improves and doesn't reduce the impact of the performance.
Yeah, it allows those times to let the magic happen. And I think what you were another thing I like to do with students, especially in that rehearsal phase, and I'll do this with shows and audition pieces, whatever you want to call it, is side coaching. One, it puts you in the moment, and so I will just so they're saying their monologue, and I'm like, what do they feel about you? What do you want from them? Do you think they like you? Oh, they just gave you a weird look. What do you think?
She's walking away. She's walking away. You better get her back. Yeah.
I could. And it's also fun to do when you're working with a duet scene, is you run over here and whisper in that ear. Yeah. But if you can help them with that and make those decisions and and come up with ways of helping them connect and use those words, because those words are very powerful tools. Those words and actions, and
I
it's the
love to tell
mix.
them.
It's a mix of those things that help tell the story, because we're storytellers. We're not reciters. Reciting
Right,
is boring.
right, right.
and you know,
And another great side coaching trick I've learned along the way that I love to do is at the top of the scene, I say, you can't talk until I say go. But what I want you to work on is the impulse to want to talk. And you have to let it build up like steam in a tea kettle until I say release. And then you can talk and you can say your word. Because they just want to come out. To be or not to be, that is the question. But no, 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 no. The impulse to speak is the first step.
mhm,
The impulse must be there, and then the decision to do it. Most of the time, we don't want to speak.
mhm,
Inertia happens. It's a
mhm,
very real force, and so to let them play with that first moment of I don't want to say it, I can't hold it back anymore, pow, really
mhm.
invigorates right from the
Which
top.
it's a great lead into the kind of other thing that helps when you're doing scenes for class or for performances or whatever it may be, um, and actual productions, is the moment before. Because you are the one that has to bring that into us. If you are doing 110 the shade and you walk onto stage, uh, it's gonna be hot. So what how can you convey that? Or maybe you start the monologue and your character's really thirsty, and so you have to come on and they're thirsty, and they have to you know they are so parched, and in order to get the water, they have to they use their monologue to help the character they're interacting with give them water. Or I mean, Mr. Shakespeare, he's not shy, and likes to raise the stakes. If you think of, and we've discussed, Lady Macbeth, the woman has to convince Macbeth to kill. And she does. Does she do that? Does she hold a gun to his head? No. Does she? How does she do that? She does
She
that with her
destroys. She
words.
emasculates him. She guilts
Her
him.
words and
She
action.
shames him. She makes him feel sympathetic toward her. She has a billion different tactics. So I am going to bring a resource into this because I think the queen of specificity and the book to go to, if you get none other, is, and hopefully you can get it up here, is the master herself.
Mm-hmm.
Uta Hagen, Respect for Acting, one of my many dog-eared copies. And she's got, in her object exercises, she's got great specifics, and we'll add them in. And what is the moment before is one of them. But who am I is the first
Mm-hmm.
question she
Yep.
says to ask. What time is it? And she means century, year, season, month,
Mm-hmm.
day, minute. Think of what minute it
Mm-hmm.
is. Because if you start out say the to be or not to be monologue, and you decide it's 6 a.m., that's very different than high noon. That's very different than midnight. So
Mm-hmm.
what time specifically is it? Where am I? Is as important as who am I talking to or any of that. Am I inside, outside, library, cathedral, my room, someone else's room,
Mm-hmm.
a forest? Where am I? What surrounds me? So thinking about what the things around you are. So just as you're putting a person at that exit sign, what is where the adjudicators are? Is it library books? What is it? Um, what are the given circumstances, which is what I think we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
before, and what happened in the past. So what's my relationship with this person like? What's happening right now? What do I expect is going to happen in the future? And what are the events? What is my relationship with the person? and to the environment where I am. What do I want? What is in my way?
Mm-hmm.
And what am I willing to do to get what I want? So I think you're so right. That moment before, where have I just come from? What have I just been
Mm-hmm.
doing? What brought me here? Did I expect to see the person here? Have I come specifically to look for them?
And what are some, speaking especially in that when you're in that tight time frame of, auditions or proceeding, is what are some physical tricks, or not tricks, but if your character is really flustered, and I think Ms. Hagen touches on this, is what are some ways that you can bring those specifics through physically? Because you can't say, oh, now imagine we're all in this place. That has to come from your physicality. So, if you're a
Right.
library, you're going to whisper if your character is winded because they've ran 12 miles. So, what's some quick ways? I mean, then that's, then before you start speaking, after you've done your introduction, then it's like 2 seconds of, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to do 10 seconds of heavy breathing,
Yeah.
but if you take the 2 or 3 seconds and go, huh, and then you go into your monologue, then we, as the audience, oh, something's, well, they're really hurried. They're panicked. Why are they panicked? And then we come to find out during the telling of the story that they share with us. And think through those little specific things, because if you take the time to find that specific, it makes the scene monologue that much stronger and creates the world of the story, because you as the actor you're the one that brings us the world of the story, especially when you do acting on a blank stage. You don't have lights, you don't have costumes, you don't have those tools that are great and help us make those specifics, but if it's a situation where that's not accessible, it's you and that's it.
Even
So
when it is, I mean, look at film. If you watch a good horror film, the scary parts are not when you see the monster. The scary parts are when you see the monster reflected in the eyes of the actor. When you
mm-hmm.
see the actor's reaction, I'm thinking of The Shining right now. And when you see the little boy, see Danny, see the two little girls, that's what's scary at first. The girls are scary. They definitely are. They're creepy. But the
Mm-hmm.
first scary part is seeing him and his eyes and his shaking. Because then you're like, what is it? What is it? What is it? And I think that remember that when you're on stage,
Mm-hmm.
especially in an audition situation, but anytime you're on
Yeah,
stage.
and as you're choosing monologues, find stuff that gives you specifics and not just an kind of an overview, but that you are speaking to someone specific.
And if it doesn't give you those, then make them up. The
Mm-hmm.
audience won't know that you're wrong. I get a lot of kids, I don't know about you, Nick, who have like, oh, this monologue is where I'm talking to myself, or this monologue is where I'm just addressing the audience, or this monologue is where I'm talking to God. And I'm like, that's a terrible idea for an audition. If you're doing one of those,
Yeah.
don't, because there's no action there. Or rework it. If you're talking to yourself, why? Are you trying
Mm-hmm.
to talk yourself into something?
Mm-hmm.
Then put a mirror over there.
Mm-hmm.
If
And
that's what your other actor
and if you're, and at times you'll have to do a classical piece, and sometimes that becomes you are speaking your thoughts out loud, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And you have
Where
to kind of split yourself in. I
yeah,
think you've got to sort of split yourself in two then,
you almost have to,
or convince the audience.
hmm
treat it like an aside and convince the audience before you. Not really. Don't really look at the adjudicators. But that impulse is you feel everybody doubting you, and you better convince
And
them.
look in that monologue for those moments of decisions or realization, and take the time to make those moments specific. Don't gloss over them. I watched one school's. They did a scene in Night Mother, and it was the very end of the show.
Oof, that's a tough show for a high school. Jeez.
These ladies handle it incredibly well, and the best moment in the scene is when the mother realized she's actually going to do it, and how did she let us know? Physically, she was like, and I just caught. I'm describing the moment now, and I've got hair on the back of my neck.
Yeah.
So, but if she had just. But if she hadn't brought that physicality in there, that physical reaction to that horrible news, and then, and that, of course, raises stakes because she has that moment of doubt, and she's like, I could lose her, and boy, does that bring that panic and that, the stakes that much higher, which, is definitely something that, because we think maybe there's a chance and maybe there's not, and where it's going to go from there. And then there's that panic.
There are two schools of thought that I've encountered, and I think I'm squarely between both of them. This is not, don't write this down, anybody. This is just me talking. But I think of them as innies and outies. And I think any actors, like Uta Hagen, will tell you in those moments to engage. She calls it emotional memory and sense memory. So in this book, she's got many pages of exercises to engage your own sense memory. So think of a time when you made a discovery. It could have been good, it could have been bad, it could have been otherwise. And instead of just thinking, oh, I was sad, or oh, it was shocking, think physically what happened to you. What was it? And if you replay this and you notice that Nick's shoulders went up, his breath got into his chest more deeply than it had before. He had that prickly feeling on the back of his neck, and that's emotional memory. And if you can, she advises that actors, as we go through life, and these things happen to us all the time, that we catalog those in some way so that we can pull it up on stage. So even though I've never had my daughter say she's going to commit suicide, there are so many things wrong with that statement. Number one, I don't have a daughter. If I can't relate to that, but I have had a realization that somebody is very sick. It made me think of when I found out my father was very sick, and what that did to me. And I could plug in that sense memory and engage that as an actor. So that's sort of innie, and thinking internally from the emotional life of the actor out. And there are other schools of thought. I mean, Stanislavski's kind of all about that.
And Uta Hagen's very much Stanislavski, and I think we get into the term method and those types of things.
I was going to bring Method of Madness. That's another one, and this is Robert Lewis. It's a good book.
And I have my own definite.
Robert Cohen, definitely a good book. And this is really old. Acting is Believing. Excellent book. It's McGaw and Clark, not as well known. It's probably out of print. I'm just guessing because it's 1,000 years old. But all of those are internal life of the character.
And making, when we talk about Stanislavski, and I think, imagination's a powerful thing, and And the way I try to help teach students about as acting is how can we tap into the magic if.
Right.
If they said of given circumstances, okay, so you're this, how would you react?
Yeah.
And because you are a unique individual person, you're going to bring your own um, specifics to that. Um, and I think, and you have to follow. I've seen the method done, and I think it's much easier to use the method in film because once you get the shot, you're done, and you can pick yourself up. If you're doing 8 shows a week, then it gets a little bit more difficult. But there are ways to tap into those, and I think Miss Hagen does a good explanation of that. Of like, okay, if your character gets shot, well, hopefully you never will be shot.
Right.
But
Right.
if you like turn on the cold water in the shower, what is that physical surprise? You're not expecting it, or
And that would be sense memory versus
that was
emotional memory. Right.
yes. And sense memory, you're looking
Mhm.
at the physical specifics and not touching into the emotional part, which gets, you're just dealing with. I, as a teacher, especially of high school students, I'm not going to go that route. I don't want to. Um, I'm not a trained psychologist, and after I've dug up these horrible, awful things and just leave them in a mess on the floor.
Right. Right. I mean, there are degrees of
Yes.
inniness, right? Uta Hagen certainly is not saying you have to, go be a homeless person for 6 weeks if you want to be a homeless person on stage, which is more what method is. I think it's
Hmm.
more about that. But yeah, it can dig into your areas your therapist may wish to dig into. However, the play is the thing, and I'll
Hmm.
never forget. I worked with wonderful. I was an assistant director early in my career with Elizabeth Carlin Metz of Vitalist Theater in Chicago, and we were watching one of our actors, and she just threw herself into the part, and was weeping and weeping and weeping so uncontrollably in this rehearsal that we couldn't understand her. We had to take a break and let her go. And I was young. I was deeply impressed with this level of reality and level of commitment. And I remember Liz looked at me and said, "Yeah, but now we have to wait 20 minutes for her to get her act together." And and our rehearsal is stalled out. When in reality, she could have just used sense memory and emotional memory and turned it on and off. It's a chemical reaction, and she could have been in better control. And I remember thinking, "Huh, I guess that's very true." She said, "I'd rather have sort of a fake tear that's well crafted than sobbing so I can't hear the line." Because the audience didn't come to watch her cry. The audience came for a story.
Hmm.
Um, and then that kind of brings me, so we've got the innies over there, and then we've got the outies. I call them the outies, and they go from the outside in. And I think Bertolt Brecht, and I didn't bring his book, but I've got some books, some Brechtian books.
Hmm.
Bertolt Brecht is probably the king of that. His idea of alienation, of he thought if you were sitting in the audience and you saw an actress crying and you nudged the person next to you and said, "Isn't she wonderful? Oh my gosh, she's crying so hard. It's so real." You've been pulled out of the story. You're no longer thinking of the story. You're thinking of that actress, and so you failed your job. When instead he thinks the actress's job, or the female actor's job, is to drive that story home to you, to construct her performance so that you understand what the whole of the story is. So it's from the outside in as opposed to the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that idea. And he said
Yeah, I really like working
the
that way
one who
too.
should be crying is the audience, not the actor. I don't care if the actor is crying. The actor needs to be taking care of the story. One of my favorites for this is Anne Bogart
Mm-hmm.
and The Viewpoints. There are a couple of different Anne Bogart books. I think there's a newer one. I have it somewhere called And Then You Act. um, and she's all about that idea. So if she's talking about, one of the great exercises for that is have a cup of water on the stage and ask a student to go pick up the cup of water and drink it and set it down. And they'll do it all at the same tempo. So she's got these different viewpoints. One of them is tempo. And then, or duration, I think, is the one that I usually play with first. And then I'll say, next person go up, same movements. Go up, pick up the water, set it down. But any one of those movements, I want you to take 4 times as long. Just one of the movements. So either the walking out there, and then you drink it, pick it up, drink it, and set it down in real time, or the picking up of it, or the drinking of it. So everything's real time except the drinking of it, or the setting down of it after you drink. So I ask the number of kids to go up and make each of them make a different choice. So you make a different part longer. You make a different part longer. And every time I ask them what the story was, and there's a different story for each of those. Did we change anything emotionally within you? No. Nothing emotionally. I didn't say you're, walking out of a heated room and you've been running for days and you've been in the desert for years. None of that. All I did was change duration. And so there's a power in working from the outside in, just as much as there's a power working from the inside out. Another great one is Augusto Boal. Lots of acting exercises in here to kind of play with that idea of what can I do with this body and this voice and this tool in order to affect the audience the way I want to affect them. And then this is probably a really super well-known one, Impro, has some of the same ideas in it. And I thought I had Michael Chekhov here.
Yeah, I was just about to mention Michael Chekhov and psychological gesture as a way of tapping into the core of a character physically. And
but you'll find it.
Tom McNally, who's a professor at the University of Northern Colorado, does a great workshop.
It's an old one, a very old one, to the actor technique on acting, Michael Chekhov. Yeah. And he talks about archetypes a lot. I love that.
And he gives some kind of great examples in there, and kind of touches on that part, because I think, sometimes it's just, what bag of tricks am I going to use? What works best for? Do you have any outie? To me, physical, I think, works real well with young actors because it's just immediately accessible there. Because I think sometimes I don't think some stuff you bring to your character, and that's just life experience. If you're playing Blanche Dubois and you're 17, you can't play Blanche Dubois. You can try, you can make the attempt, but life's got to beat you down a wee bit, or you have to have some disappointment, or to hit those type of
and a fear of dying.
To hit those parts where that you're, ooh, it's just one of those things that comes in time with life experience. But
and even now, as an adult, biologically adult actor as I am, I use both. I find that in my early preparation, I use a lot of the innie stuff. I want to know who my character is, who the mom is, where I've been, what my given circumstances are, what day, all of that stuff. And I need it. And then once it gets time to get up on my feet, I feel like I owe it to the script to step away, recognize that all of that is there, and step away from it and start looking at as the whole picture. What is my job as the storyteller here? What am I supposed to convey to the audience? And I find I use both. And I don't know. I was thinking about this guy too. I'm not. Spoiler alert. I am not a big Meisner fan. I think he's really good for. I think he's really good for students who are timid and quiet and don't have a lot of size and volume in their acting. That's when I'll bring in Meisner. If I've got a bunch of kids like that who are don't know how to yell, and some kids are like that. Lots of students are like that. Don't have that sort of haven't engaged the tiger within, and I think Meisner is really good for that, for unleashing that. On the flip side, I think my actors who I can almost always tell when they've been Meisner trained because they just tend toward anger and maybe tend to confuse volume for passion. And I think it's a safe feeling for a lot of people to just be angry and loud. And there's not necessarily, if gone unchecked, it can lead to acting without vulnerability, and I'm just not down with that.
Yeah, one of the scenes I had watched, they started at full tilt, and I was like, "Oh, there's no place else to go."
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Another interesting one that I think we've mentioned before, but it's a great book and a lot of great stories. Except I have a feeling that people are going to have to look up and use Wikipedia for some of the references now. It's Audition by Michael Shurtleff. There you go. I think some of the things mentioned in there are now you're gonna have to get on YouTube to look up the people.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, but it's such a great book. It really is.
Talk about playing the opposite. What a great acting exercise is playing the opposite, because it gets you out of I'm da 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 is and brings a different view. And sometimes, it's finding those, because that playing the opposite can help you get that specific and that individuality. And trust your individuality, and that it's something special, and it's only something that you have, and that's why we want to watch you. That's why we like watching people on stage, is those specific things you can bring to it. If you can watch different. How many Hamlets have there been over the years? Thousands upon thousands. And they each bring something interesting to it. I was listening to podcast driving on a long trip, and it had Benedict Cumberbatch on it, and he talked about him and Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. They played Frankenstein in London, and they would switch the parts. And so, how do...
My high school teacher did that to us. We would come in for a rehearsal, and it would be switch day, and we would all have to play. We would look on the casting list, and we would have to play someone else's part. No script.
Yeah.
I had to just go do it. Oh, it was a blast. I mean, it was all.
And if I can, I'll do a speech through a show.
Yeah, love those.
Definitely do that with Mid-80s Night Dream, because it gets you out of, oh, I'm supposed to go here and do this. Yes, we need those parameters, especially like when you're doing stage combat. You definitely have to follow those procedures, or just for your own safety, but it frees it up. It helps you think differently. And, if you're working on a show that plays that long, you have to keep it fresh. Otherwise, why be in a show for, 2 years? Yes, it's to put food on the table, but you also want to be fulfilled also. So it's taking that time and connecting with the people with you on stage. And it does take an effort, but enjoy that effort and enjoy using your imagination and enjoy that, because if you're doing that for a living, you're a pretty darn lucky person to be able to do that. So don't forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And even if you're not, so many people auditioned and didn't get cast in the part that you're in.
mhm.
You owe it to everybody to have a great time and
Yeah, I will use that
go for
statement usually at least once during a show, especially when they're like not where I want them to be. And
it.
I'll say it as a general thing is just, I told people no,
Yeah.
and I'm kind of maybe I should have told them yes.
And I always say there's a reason they call it a play.
Yeah.
It's not a serious. It's not a job. It's play. So go play hard and play well and play fair and play
hmm
nice.
And then, what a great adventure. I mean, I think we're lucky to be able to do that and help students and actors enjoy that process. If you think how much entertainment we as Americans consume, people want to be entertained. They
Mm-hmm.
want to hear stories. Take pride in yourself as a storyteller
Mm-hmm.
and share those stories. It can help. I mean, it gives meaning to life, and and it feeds your soul. So help get out there and work that lunch line of the soul and help.
And I think too, all of the things that we've just said, the big bullet points that we've talked about for being specific. Who are you talking to? What are you trying to do with your words? What was the moment before? And where do you have a realization? If you stop and think of your life that way and your day-to-day conversations, you start to gain an understanding of the people around you. You start to gain an understanding of why people behave as they do. You start to think of things when someone comes in and is grouchy. If they were panting and out of breath, they've probably had a stressful time getting there. And you start to live your life awake and with deeper intention as opposed to living as a habit, which is what we were talking about with the acting. Boring acting is habitual acting, and all of the
Mhm.
tricks that we just gave you are ways to shake people out of those habits. So it's theater, good for life. That's
It
all.
does us all good.
I think my favorite moment so far in all of the shows that we've done is that I knew you were going to say this book, and I had it waiting. I literally, as soon as you said, there's one more book, I grabbed it off my pile. I was like, I'm probably going to say this.
Well,
My
I mean,
shirtless
that's
audition.
something I remember reading being 17,
It's a
18,
Bible. Yeah.
and, all those hopes and aspirations, and
And now you're Blanche
wouldn't.
Dubois. Now we can
I've
play
always,
that part.
yeah, I've always
Depended
on the kindness of strangers.
of Michael Shirtless. Yeah. Too true. Oh
um,
my.
so I want to thank everyone for joining us this week, and to be sure to catch us. We're both, I believe, traveling next week, so we'll pick up the show 2 weeks from now, and we'll be excited to join you then. Be sure to check out EdReach. There's new things coming, so just go there and find out what they are. That should be any time now. And enjoy being a storyteller in whatever facet you do that. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's edtech4 theater spelled correctly. And my blog's www.edtech4theater.com. And Danielle, how can people find you on the interwebs?
find me on Twitter at Ms. Filas, MSFILAS, and you can go to my blog, and there's a billion ways to find me on there at edunerd.blogspot.com.
And we hope to see you in a couple of weeks. And thanks again for joining us. Have a great week.